Hey, I'm Gordon Greenberg. I'm the director and co-writer of Holiday Inn. I always like to say that I'm nostalgic for a time that I never lived through. I felt very comfortable in this world, in this time period. There's an innocence and a generosity of spirit to the humor. When I start writing something, think about why it matters to me and why it moves me. And in the case of Holiday Inn, it was the notion of what's real and what's for show. It also had a story that I thought had a rare mix of heart and humanity and also silliness. Redemption in the end, all the things you look for in a good Broadway musical. Heartwarming, hilarious, and full of tap dance. So our protagonist, Jim, makes the bold decision to quit show business and move to Connecticut. He buys a house at auction. It's a very good deal, or so he thinks. And he gets there and ultimately finds that he can't abandon who he is, and that changing and growing is an inside job. But in this sort of new environment, he discovers a way to meld his passion for performance, his talent as a musician, and the simplicity of country life. And in the words of Jim, it does take a little bit of performing to live a normal life. It debuted 2 years ago at the Goodspeed Opera House, where we spent several months working on it in front of audiences. The second production was at probably the largest theater in the country, the St. Louis Muni, which has 12,000 seats and is 110-foot proscenium. So you can imagine the challenges of going from one of the smallest at Goodspeed, which is about a 25-foot proscenium, to something 4 times as big. We've experienced the extremes, and now we're in a place that's both extravagant and intimate. Here at Studio 54 at Roundabout on Broadway. In between all the productions, we did readings, and we would work on a script, send it back and forth. One of the major benefits of having a co-writer is that I would do a version of the scene, send it to him, he'd redo it, do a version of the next scene, I'd redo it, send it back to him, and you get a second draft when you have a first draft. We are people with different sensibilities, and we're both looking at it from unique perspectives. Now that we're in the trenches and finally opening on Broadway, the work is much more focused, and it's less about broad strokes and more about very specific surgery. How do we make the most of this little piece of real estate? In a musical, between songs, you have maybe a couple of pages, and very often we're talking about one beat of a scene. So how do you take 4 lines and make them pay for themselves so that they are active, so that they produce conflict, they produce humor, and they give a sense of history. And that's why we stay up till 2 or 3 in the morning every night debating and trying out different things. Basically, this marks my Broadway debut as a writer-director. My actual Broadway debut was when I was 12 years old in The Little Prince of the Aviator with Anthony Rapp, among others. I did that, I did How to Succeed several years later, and Grease. It feels great to finally be directing a show on Broadway, but I will say ultimately, the work is the same as the work I do in London, Chicago, San Diego, Los Angeles. You're in a theater trying to tell stories in the best possible way, trying to fill the room with as much joy and pathos as you can, and make the hairs on the back of people's necks stand up.